The collision wasn't the anomaly. 4 minutes after the USS Connecticut struck something in October 2021, the passive sonar array recorded a secondary contact. Not an echo, not debris, a discrete acoustic signature, at 37,800 feet deeper than the official Mariana Trench floor. And it was holding depth. When the submarine began emergency ascent, the contact matched its rate of climb for 11 minutes, then it stopped, not gradually, instantly, like a switch being thrown. The Navy classified the incident as collision with uncharted seamount. But seamounts don't follow submarines, and they don't appear 1,800 feet below the deepest point we've ever measured. Stay until the end, because the data that was deleted tells us more than the data that survived. For 70 years, Challenger Deep has been the official bottom, 10,935 meters, 35,876 feet. We treat this like bedrock fact. The Navy uses it, NOAA maps it, every submarine knows it. But depth is not a line on a map, it's a consensus. A statistical average derived from thousands of sonar pings that mostly agree with each other. And when they don't agree, when one ping says the floor is 600 meters deeper than it should be, that data gets flagged, filtered, smoothed into the average. This is called bathymetric outlier rejection. It's standard practice. It prevents errors. It keeps maps clean. But it also means that if something real is down there, something that only appears occasionally in a narrow trench under specific conditions, we would systematically erase it. The USS Connecticut's sonar logs were supposed to be routine, a passive listen during deep patrol, but what the system recorded after the collision wasn't routine. It was coherent, stable, and it behaved like a vehicle, not terrain. Tonight, we're reconstructing what happened in the 11 minutes after the impact, using the physics of sound, the geometry of the trench, and the one piece of data that wasn't deleted fast enough, the hydrophone timestamp. The Connecticut struck the object at 11:16 UTC. The crew felt it, the hull sensors logged it, damage control teams scrambled, standard procedure. But the sonar log shows something else. Between 11:16 and 11:20, 4 minutes, the passive array recorded nothing unusual. No echo, no movement, just the ambient noise of the deep ocean. Then at 11:20:14, a new contact appeared, bearing 187 degrees, range 420 meters, depth 11,520 meters. That's 37,800 feet. Here's the problem. The submarine was at 10,900 meters at the time. The seabed, according to the official bathymetric chart, should have been at 10,935 meters, just 35 meters below the sub. But the sonar was painting something 620 meters deeper. At first, the sonar operators assumed it was a bottom bounce, sound reflecting off the walls of the trench and creating a false depth. This happens in steep terrain, you filter it out. But bottom bounces don't track motion, and this contact was tracking. When the sub began its emergency ascent at 11:21, the contact started moving upward. Not toward the sub, parallel to it, matching its vertical speed almost exactly, 0.8 meters per second. For 11 minutes. To understand why this is wrong, you need to understand how passive sonar works in a trench. Sound doesn't travel in straight lines at these depths. It bends. It refracts through thermoclines and pressure layers. And in a V-shaped trench like the Mariana, it bounces off the walls, creating multiple paths to the same target. A skilled sonar operator can tell the difference between a real contact and a ghost. The timing is off, the bearing shifts, the Doppler is inconsistent. But this contact was stable, the bearing held steady. The range decreased slightly, but in a way consistent with the sub's ascent trajectory, not with reflection distortion. And the depth, it stayed locked at exactly 620 meters below the submarine. No drift, no jitter. If it was terrain, the depth should have stayed fixed. The sub rises, the floor stays put. That's how gravity works. If it was a reflection, the geometry would have shifted as the sub moved. The angle changes, the bounce point changes. But this didn't behave like terrain or reflection. It behaved like something maintaining a fixed vertical separation. Which means it was either a massive sonar malfunction spanning multiple independent sensors, or something down there was compensating for the sub's ascent. At 11:32, the contact did something new. It emitted. Passive sonar listens. It doesn't send signals, it detects sounds made by other things. Engines, propellers, biologics. The Connecticut's array was in listen-only mode. And at 11:32:07, the array picked up a low-frequency pulse, 48 Hz, duration 2.3 seconds. It was not a submarine. Subs use frequencies above 1 kHz for active sonar. They don't broadcast at 48 Hz, that's the range of whale calls or seismic rumbles. But whales don't dive to 37,000 feet, and seismic events don't follow submarines. The pulse repeated twice, 11:32:19, and again at 11:32:31. Each time the frequency was identical, the duration identical, the interval identical, 12 seconds. This is not how geology behaves. Earthquakes are chaotic, magma fractures don't pulse like a metronome. And it's not how biology behaves either. Whale songs vary, they drift in pitch, they respond to context. This was mechanical precision. At 11:34 the pulses stopped, the contact remained silent again. And then at 11:35:42, exactly 11 minutes after it first appeared, the contact vanished. Not faded, vanished, one sweep of the sonar it's there, the next sweep gone. The sub was at 10,200 meters by then, ascending fast. The contact had been at 10,820 meters, well above the official seabed. And then it wasn't anywhere. Within 48 hours, the sonar logs were classified. The collision was attributed to an uncharted seamount. The Navy released a statement, case closed. But the seamount explanation has problems. First, the Mariana Trench is one of the most surveyed regions of the Pacific. The 5 Deeps expedition mapped it in 2019 with centimeter-level precision. If there was a seamount tall enough to reach 10,900 meters, it would have appeared on the maps. It didn't. Second, the damage pattern on the Connecticut's bow was analyzed by independent naval architects after the sub returned to port. The impact was not consistent with rock. The hull plating showed shearing, not crushing, something smooth, metallic, possibly manufactured. Third, the sonar data. The official report claims the contact was a multipath artifact, a false echo caused by sound bouncing off the trench walls. But multipath artifacts don't emit 48 Hz pulses. And they don't maintain fixed range during a climb. The Navy knows this, the sonar operators know this, yet the logs were pulled from the standard classified archive and moved to a higher clearance tier. They're not just secret, they're compartmentalized. Why? There's a concept in oceanography called depth uncertainty windows. These are regions where the seabed depth is poorly constrained, not because we haven't measured it, but because the measurements don't agree. In flat abyssal plains, this isn't a problem. The floor is smooth, sonar returns cluster tightly, easy. But in trenches, especially narrow, steep trenches like the Mariana, the data scatters. One ship measures 10,900 meters, another measures 11,100 meters, a third measures 10,800. So what do? We average them, we smooth the map. We create a single official depth that represents the consensus. But what if the scatter isn't random? What if some of those deeper readings are real and they're only appearing when something is down there? In 2003, a Japanese research vessel recorded a depth of 11,034 meters in the Mariana. The measurement was flagged as unreliable. It didn't match the surrounding data. In 2011, a U.S. Navy survey recorded 11,090 meters, also flagged, also excluded. In 2019, the 5 Deeps expedition, using the most advanced sonar ever deployed, recorded isolated pings at 11,200 meters. They were labeled noise spikes. But what if they weren't noise? What if something in the trench occasionally occupies those depths, and when it does, sonar picks it up? And when it's not there, the readings snap back to 10,935 meters. The official depth. The one we all agree on. The one that lets us sleep at night. The USS Connecticut incident was not about an attack, it was about a measurement. A depth reading that conflicts with the map. A contact that behaves like terrain but moves like a machine. And the Navy's response wasn't to investigate, it was to classify. Here's what we know for certain. At 37,800 feet, sonar detected a coherent return. That return tracked the submarine's ascent for 11 minutes. It emitted a repeating 48 Hz pulse, mechanical, precise, deliberate. And then it vanished, leaving no trace on any public bathymetric survey. This is not a story about monsters. It's a story about instruments telling us something we don't want to hear. The Mariana Trench is not the deepest point we've measured. It's the deepest point we've agreed to accept. But the trench itself, it doesn't care about our consensus. And if the Navy's sonar logs are accurate, if the contact was real, then somewhere beneath Challenger Deep, there is a depth we haven't named. a depth that only appears when something occupies it. And on October 2, 2021, a US submarine found it. Then something found the submarine back. If you want to see the bathymetric data that doesn't match the maps, check the video on the right. If you want to hear the 48 Hz frequency analyzed, check the video on the left. And if you think the Navy deleted the data by accident, think again. I'll see you in the dark.